I'm Judy Roth. I'm Vice President of the League of Women Voters, and I'm very happy to welcome you all here this evening. Most of all, we would like to thank the Bridgehampton Library and Susan LaVista for working with architects and review boards and the whole world of how difficult it is to sometimes build things out here to have this absolutely beautiful library. And we are so happy to have our very first meeting here. And Sue's going to say a couple of words.
And first of all, again, I'm so thrilled to be able to offer or host programs like this here in our beautiful new library, and hope that we'll be able to do many more things like this and lots of different other sorts of things as well. And I think we're ready when you are.
Okay. I want to introduce Sue Avedon, who is the head of our Natural Resource Committee, and she will conduct the program.
Good evening and welcome. Very happy to see you all here. The film you're about to see is entitled American Lawn. It was produced by Seal Downs on behalf of the Accabonac Protection Committee. It is one of a series entitled Long Live Accabonac. The series started out with topics that related specifically to the environs of the Accabonac Creek, such as salt marsh. Other topics of more general interest include invaders in paradise, and they talk about invasive species, American lawn, which you're going to see tonight, and there's an upcoming film about organic lawn care. The last two were produced in collaboration with Arlene Coulter, and now we'll see American lawn.
At the eastern end of Long Island, where the jaws of the North and South Forks gape, you will see on the South Fork a creek bounded by barrier spits across the bay from Gardiner's Island. We call it Accabonac Creek. Some call it Accabonac Harbor. We are the Accabonac Protection Committee, a group of citizens whose aim is to protect our creek and its watershed, its health and its beauty, for ourselves and for others, now and in the future.
Americans do love their lawns. Some would say they're obsessed with them, competing constantly with the neighbors to show the smoothest and greenest on the block. From the smallest cottage to the grandest mansion, you see one main aim: to have the largest possible area covered with lawn as much as possible, like a golf course. As we shall see, this has its costs.
You know, I've often used the term the trophy lawn, and you know, through my eyes, in my childhood of late 70s into the 80s, I will suggest that our landscapes were much different. They weren't preened and really, I guess, attended to the way they are now with, a whole host of chemicals and other alterations that really have a negative impact on the entire system. This is all about cleaner bays and a safer environment.
We use over 3 million tons of synthetic fertilizers on our lawns in the United States every year, and 60% of the nitrogen applied to lawns annually ends up in the groundwater. Nitrogen is toxic to human beings, and nitrogen causes algal blooms in the water, and the algal blooms can't be sustained, and when they die off, they take all the aquatic life with it. There are dead zones all across the country where nothing is alive in the water because of fertilizer runoff from trying to maintain our greener than necessary lawns. As a result, there are communities across the country that are banning gas-powered lawnmowers and fertilizers in a last-ditch effort to save their waterways.
When it rains, fertilizers and pesticides run off directly into ponds and creeks. But also, they soak down past the lawn they were intended for and contaminate the groundwater. From there, people with wells can pump some up and drink it. The rest goes with the groundwater into those same ponds and creeks.
We use over 70 million pounds of pesticides every year in the United States on our lawns. Of the most commonly used pesticides, 13 can cause cancer, 14 can cause birth defects, 11 can interfere with reproduction, and 21 can damage the nervous system.
This is a true story. An owner heard her outdoor cat scratching at the door. Strange, because she usually pushed it open. When the door was open, the cat fell in, convulsing, no control over her muscles, face twitching. On the way to the vet, the cat got worse, rolled into the smallest possible ball with a very hot body and lots of fur falling out, very limp. When the vet saw her and did a quick check, he quickly picked her up and said, "She has all the signs of exposure to pesticides. I'm giving her an IV and a thorough bath. I'll let you know if it doesn't work." After an hour, the vet called to say he had been able to lower the cat's temp and slow the convulsions. No longer worried for her life, he was holding her until she could take a very thorough bath. The vet said the pesticide was working on the cat exactly the way it's designed to work on insects. Muscles twitch until the body temp heats up to the point of death. The cat recovered, but needed several months of muscle relaxants. P.S. Turns out the next door property had been sprayed that day.
On Long Island, the DEC and the Suffolk County Department of Health did a test of groundwater private wells, and they found that 51% of private wells contained pesticides from lawns. And I looked on the website for the Centers for Disease Control because that word "can" was in there. But they have a chart with 6 different categories, from This doesn't cause cancer to category number 6. It definitely causes cancer. And all these lawn pesticides are in the 5th category. That means we're very close to determining that they do cause cancer, and yet we're using them on our lawns. And most people will tell me that children need lawns. Children are very susceptible to pesticide damage because they play on the lawn, they put their hands on their mouth. Pesticides are tracked into the house, where it's even more dangerous because without the light breaking down the pesticides, they remain inside the house for a very long time. Animals are getting sick from these pesticides because they don't wear shoes, and our feet are extremely absorbent parts of our bodies, so pesticides get into our dogs and cats, and they have cancer in very alarming numbers. Furthermore, children and pets don't have fully developed immune systems, so their body can't handle the pesticides, and the pesticides stay in their body for a very long time.
But wait, there is another way. To go organic. The best fertilizer of all is compost. But if you can't find any, several commercial organic fertilizers are available at some of the same outlets that sell the poisonous kinds.
Want to tell us a little bit about how you take care of your lawn?
Well, I do very little. As a matter of fact, I use only organic fertilizer, usually twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. I don't have any in-ground sprinkler system, and with all the rain we've had this year, I haven't even had to water at all, even with just a regular sprinkler. Our well is right up here in the front, so I use absolutely no pesticides of any kind, and the lawn does very nicely. And I think you can probably see that for yourself. It's as simple as can be.
Beautiful.
Lawnmowers have no emission standards, and so they're major polluters. 1 hour of power mowing emits the equivalent in air pollution as driving 350 miles by car. The cumulative impact of so many people mowing their lawns, using their weed whacker, their leaf blower, their edgers, the cumulative impact of this is staggering. In fact, 5% of the air pollution in the United States is caused by gardening equipment. The EPA says that garden equipment produces 6.8 million tons of ozone and carbon monoxide annually. We use as high as 800 million gallons of gasoline every year to power lawn mowing equipment. And the EPA says that gardeners spill more than 17 million gallons every year while refueling lawn equipment. And that's more than was spilled in the Gulf of Alaska by the Exxon Valdez. Noise pollution. The most frequent complaint that Americans have about their neighborhoods is noise. Silence is a basic human need, and all the lawnmowers and the weed whackers and the trimmers and the trimmers, they're affecting us emotionally, psychologically, physically, cognitively. We need silence. We need to stop this noise pollution.
But maybe we don't have to mow everything.
So in this area, because everybody does want a piece of lawn, and I would never say that lawns should be altogether abolished. I think it's just about changing perception and changing behavior that's kind of locked in. How much lawn do you actually need? And what does it have to look like? So I find that if my lawn is primarily in the shade, it does not need to be watered so much. Lawn that's in the sun that isn't watered is more likely to grow weeds and prickly things. And because it's late in the summer now, and the tall grasses are starting to lie down, which they do later on after they bloom. It's a little bit harder to see the distinction. In the spring, it's really obvious as the areas that are mowed versus not mowed. So just to describe, this is a rectangle of lawn with a path leading off on that side, and then various paths leading to the doors. This is the time of year when it really looks its worst, and it doesn't look bad.
It looks beautiful.
so that, you know, if it can look good now, hey, I'm there.
Grass can be replaced in shady areas with a charming moss garden. It's soft and velvety underfoot and has a different but just as attractive look. This one was created by Galen Williams, an East Hampton landscaper.
If you use native grass, tall grass such as this, no irrigation is required at all. Taller grass keeps the soil shaded, so there's less soil water evaporation. And furthermore, the taller the grass, the deeper the roots go, so the tall grass can tap into water resources that short grass cannot.
This is panicum switchgrass, and it's sort of like, it's just fabulous. This grass is a little slow coming up in the spring, so other grasses come up first, the vernal grasses, but this will stay up all winter, and it turns the most beautiful color in the fall. And it's just taking over. I put a little bit in, and now it's seeding around really nicely. And this is little blue stem. And this is a really, also, you can see the blue stem if you look really closely right there. I don't know, does that show? And that too is an incredible fall and winter grass, so I don't cut this until the spring. A great deal of what a wild lawn will be is governed by mowing. So that's what, it's all adventures in mowing, because when you mow and where you mow, is the whole, that's all. That's really all you need to worry about.
Reducing your lawn area and providing a canopy of trees and native shrubs and perennials will reduce stormwater runoff because the water drips off the trees and shrubs slowly, whereas on a lawn it just lands and slaloms across the landscape. When you water your trees and shrubs, it drips off slowly and prevents the runoff completely. Even a 24% tree and shrub canopy will reduce stormwater runoff by 40%. Water use. A 1,000 square foot lawn uses 10,000 gallons of water annually, and the EPA estimates that watering lawns accounts for 30 to 70% of the water use across this country during the months that lawns are watered. Out west, it's year-round. Out here in the east, it's only for about 6 months out of the year. But during those 6 months, we could be using up to 70% of our water supply on lawns. And water across the earth is a hot topic. People are going to war over their water. People are being killed fighting for their own water. And here we are using water to mow our lawn, to keep our lawns green.
In case you feel pretty complacent about that huge aquifer underfoot, filled with stupendous quantities of water, note this. According to Sarah Mayland, highly regarded hydrogeologist, no more than 10 to 15% of this water can ever be pumped out of it. Without continual replenishment by rainfall, we'd all be in deep trouble. Sarah Mayland also says that none or almost none of lawn watering ever reaches the aquifer. And we know that a high percentage evaporates into the air before it reaches the ground, so it is totally wasted. Speaking of waste, did you ever see sprinklers that work on timers busily sprinkling in the rain?
Government data shows that pesticides jeopardize 375 already endangered and threatened species. And most chemical lawn treatments are highly toxic to songbirds. It not only contaminates them if they're sprayed directly, which they very often are in their nests, but it also contaminates their food and water supply. And the Audubon Society gives us a conservative estimate, they say, that at least 67 million songbirds die every year from pesticide poisoning. That's a staggering, saddening statistic. Birds are declining all around the world, and we're trading the birds in for our lawns. And insect pesticides are rarely species-specific. Along with whatever insects we consider pests, we're also killing the butterflies, the bees, the dragonflies, the damselflies. And out of all the insects on Earth, only 15% of them are considered pests to us, and yet we're killing, along with that 15%, the 85% of insects that are wonderful and magical and beautiful and important to us. They're important food sources to mammals and reptiles and hawks and owls and other creatures that we really need. So we need the insects, and we're killing them with our pesticides. Not only that, where pesticides are regularly applied to lawns, 60 to 90% of the earthworms are killed, and we need earthworms. Not only that, we need to the reason we rake our leaves is to save our lawns, but the earth needs leaves. The soil, the nutrition in the soil is based on the microorganisms in the soil. If you have a handful of soil, you have more organisms, live organisms in your hand than there are human beings on Earth. And those organisms, there's a whole food chain in the soil that begins with the leaves falling. And when you take away the leaves, you're essentially making your land less fertile. And we've traded in all that fertility and all that soil life for our lawns. Also, under the leaves, lots of insects and rodents live, and those are very important food sources for turtles and owls and hawks. So we're trading in so many things for our lawn care practices.
It would be very naive to suppose that after 24 hours, these pesticides are gone.
I have developed over certain observations after having so many clients for so many years. So I have two kind of things things about lawn that I think of. One is that generally, I mean, this is horrible typecasting, but generally the husband wants a big lawn and wants a green lawn. And it's the husband that may not take any other role in the landscape, but wants the lawn and also wants to talk to the landscaper about every little patch of lawn. And the other thing is that I'm hoping that like those perfect green lawns will be perceived pretty soon like smokers. Because when I started out, smoking was so cool, so elegant, so suave, and now it's not. And I think that driving by a brilliant green lawn in not so long is going to start to brand people as dicey, you know, not right, not smart, basically, just like taking health. Yeah, we're taking a risk with their health and their children. And now I have no problem now when I tell my clients, do you want your grandchildren playing on a lawn that's just been treated with chemicals? It's a very easy decision. They say, oh, I had no idea. And that, so I don't have to say anymore. It's done.
Has the time come for the day of the lawn to end?
Okay, over on our far right is Kevin McAllister. Kevin has been Peconic Baykeeper since 1998. His role is to safeguard the ecological health of Long Island's Peconic and South Shore bays. Kevin has extensive academic and professional training as a coastal biologist. His 20 years of experience involves patrolling the bays, monitoring water quality, enforcing environmental protection laws, and working with government officials and civic leaders to develop progressive conservation policies. Kevin has earned undergraduate degrees in natural resources conservation and biological science and has a master's degree in coastal management. He was recently recognized by the Long Island Press as one of the 50 most influential Long Islanders. Suzanne Ruggles, whom you now recognize from having been in the film, has authored a new book entitled The Tyranny of Landscaping, in which she points out the fact that what most people consider weeds are actually native plants. By creating the, quote, environmental cancer that is the common lawn, unquote, native vegetation along with the animals and insects that depend on them are all killed. Suzanne lectures monthly at the Nature Lyceum School for the Environment, as well as at civic and environmental organizations. She was recently awarded the Source Water Protection Award for Conservation and Landscaping.
The mic went off.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. She sits on the board of directors of the Wildlife Rescue Center of the Hamptons and has seen firsthand the tragedies that befall wildlife that are injured by lawnmowers, poisoned by pesticides, stuck in fences, starved by the absence of food sources, or injured by chainsaws or weed whackers. Finally, we have Beth Fattini. Beth is a professor of environmental policy and program director for the Sustainability Institute at Malloy College. She helps coordinate the Clean Energy Leadership Task Force, which brings together local municipalities to identify cost-effective ways to implement use of clean energy technologies. She has won the EPA's Region 2 Environmental Quality Award for 2010. Beth offers lectures around Long Island on non-toxic green living, as well as organic lawn care, and has coordinated an annual regional organic turf trade show and the Long Island Organic Landscaper List for the last 9 years. She holds a master's degree of studies in environmental law from Vermont School of Law and a BA in environmental studies from Connecticut College. So, our panelists will say a few words in regard to the subject that we saw in the movie, and then any of you can ask any questions to find out more. Thanks.
If I may start, because I'm going to talk maybe macro scale, and I know Suzanne and Beth will probably bring it down to more, I guess, specific backyard level. I've been on this issue certainly since my tenure with respect to the changing landscapes and what I would consider the suburbanization of the East End. And it is real and eminent, there's no question about that. You heard in my introduction, I really commit a great deal of my time and effort to protecting water quality, which is intrinsically connected to land use. Over time, obviously, and a couple of terms, and you heard this in the film, obviously, the term watershed. And what that means is it's the geographical area of land which drains the fresh water into our receiving basins. The way that water works is through several pathways. Seal's narration, obviously, with stormwater runoff being a significant source of that fresh water, and very problematic in that it really sweeps up a host of pollutants. More naturalized conveyances, obviously, are freshwater wetlands and swamps that ultimately feed our bays. And then last, which is really the lion's share of fresh water that comes into our systems, is groundwater seepage. So again, as the crow flies, let's say, you know, the basin or the watershed defined for the Peconic Basin really splits the Twin Forks. So, you know, on top of that elevation, if essentially over time, and it may take many years because groundwater moves on the order of about a foot a day. So we could be talking decades before that water actually makes its way to a nearby stream or open pond or open bay. But trust me when I tell you it is coming. One of my biggest concerns, and I would consider it the plague of our waters, and that's nitrogen pollution. The nitrogen sources at least, they're somewhat out of our control, at least locally, is obviously atmospheric deposition. But more locally, we're dealing with thousands of septic systems that are really seeping into groundwater, and obviously green lawns and agricultural practices with the use of fertilizers. As we enrich that groundwater, as again these higher concentrations in that groundwater actually reach our ponds, our streams, our open bays, They have enriched the environment. And just as you would perhaps use a fertilizer around shrubs, the same thing is true. We're feeding the microalgae in that water column. And then all of a sudden there's a burst of growth. And clearly I've seen a number of tributaries turn everything from black to green to purple to brown. And now we are, I'm seeing the state of New York actually in their most recent impaired waters list that's just coming out. They are classifying a great portion of the entire South Shore estuary, Great South Bay, Moriches, Shinnecock Bay, as impaired waters, listing brown tide and the connection to on-site wastewater treatment systems, a la cesspools. But again, the infusion of that nitrogen creates this burst of growth. It's short-lived, so that as the water turns green or brown in the macro or microalgae, after a couple weeks it's going to die off and then consume the oxygen, the dissolved oxygen out of that water column. And that's when you end up with the secondary impacts of fish kills and crab kills. Again, it's very destructive over long term. We've seen persistent brown tides in Shinnecock and Moriches Bays for the last 3 years, some of the highest levels recorded. Knock on wood, we have not seen that in Peconic Bay, but I would argue that we're not necessarily through the woods here. And perhaps, again, there's other problems associated with it. And very briefly on obviously the pesticide front, and I know Suzanne was articulating the impacts of pesticides, but ultimately the use of these chemicals that get entrained within groundwater, and again it may take years, but they're not being broken down, nor is nitrogen in our very sandy soils. So really once it gets down into soils below root zone in case of nitrogen, it's water soluble, and then it really is tracking with groundwater. And just very low levels, very low concentrations of different insecticides and herbicides can really wreak havoc. And Suffolk County's been doing some monitoring, particularly along the North Fork, and they're seeing extremely high levels of herbicides actually welling up out of bay bottom. And it begs the question, if you're an eelgrass bed, an important habitat in our bays historically, can you sustain in an environment that, again, your root zones are taking up herbicides that are, intended to kill some kind of weed either in our backyards or an ag field. So again, it's a real issue. I think over the long term we've got to change our collective behaviors relative to individual, property management techniques, and in turn be looking out to, I guess a more institutional scale with respect to, local agriculture as well as golf courses to ensure that, some of the, let's say, behaviors that they are employing that may be causing problems for our surface waters, they in turn are going to start to address. So again, that's, I guess, a macro scale of groundwater and the threats from nitrogen and pesticides, and I'd love to turn it over now. Thank you.
My grandfather was an organic popcorn farmer in Iowa. But by the time I met him, he was living on Long Island in a very small house with a big yard and no lawn. Vegetable gardens and flower gardens all the way around. And he was a very wise man. He was my favorite person on earth. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather. When he died, he left me all his tools and all of his organic gardening magazines. And the reason I say he was wise was because when he planted blueberries, he planted a row for him and my grandmother and a row for the birds. And when he planted strawberries, he planted a row for him and my grandmother and a row for the turtles. And the lettuce for him and my grandmother and a row for the bunnies. He included all of nature in his gardening paradigm. So I went to school for art and psychology and tried to work indoors and absolutely couldn't dress up. Had to get outdoors. So I started work at a garden center, and I rented a little cottage in the middle of a vacant farm, 14 acres. And all of these fields had tall grass in them. And I spent every spare moment I could in the fields walking amongst the tall grass and looking at all the creatures there, all the insect life, all the mammal and reptile life. It was an ecosystem that was teeming with life. And that made me feel alive. So my little cottage had a lawn, but I decided not to mow it. And I wanted to see what happened. Native plant seeds can live ungerminated in the soil for up to 50 years. And native plants require no water, no fertilization, no pesticides once they're established. And they have the added benefit of attracting butterflies, hummingbirds, songbirds, turtles, fox, deer, any wildlife you can name has co-evolved with native plants. So when I let my lawn grow, native plants came up, and I was in heaven. I was surrounded by delightful creatures all of the time. And I was working at a garden center, and one day I came home and somebody had mowed it. And I was so disheartened. And no one ever admitted to doing it. They may have thought they were doing me a favor, because everybody's supposed to have a lawn. But when my dismay was publicized, no one ever admitted it. So I let it grow again, and sure enough, someone mowed it again. So many years down the road, I had my own gardening business, and I bought a home of my own, and the first thing I did was put a privacy screen the whole way around, and decided that Mother Nature and I were going to see what happened here. And it was a delightful experiment, and one that changed my life, literally. I didn't have much time to take care of my own property because I owned business, and the last thing I wanted to do was come home and tend my own garden. So one day in August, finally, when I had the time to go outside and see what was happening, there it was. The tall grass, the wildflowers, the butterflies, dragonflies, songbirds, hummingbirds. I had a meadow, and I had native flowers everywhere. As I walked through the grass, and the grasses were dancing, I couldn't feel the breeze, but I saw it. All the little seed heads were dancing all around me. I felt like I was in Alice in Wonderland. It is so breathtakingly beautiful to be in a meadow. So just about that time when I was discovering this beautiful way of life, oh, I didn't mention, there were turtles in the grass, chipmunks. Since then I've had fox, I've had deer, and I love deer. I'm not ashamed to say it. I love it when they come to my yard. And because I have native plants, I read this in The Economist, deer saliva stimulates plant growth when it's a native plant. And I've seen it over and over again. When a deer nibbles a native plant where there used to be one shoot, now there's 10. Because native plants and wildlife have evolved together. Just about this time when I was discovering all of this, I read in the newspaper that the Southampton Town Board was trying to legislate the lawn, and they were saying that all lawns had to be cut within 2 inches, and all trees and shrubs had to be trimmed. This was going to be the law. And if that became the law, this would make me an outlaw. And yet I knew that what I was doing was right for the earth and all of its creatures. So I did research, and it wasn't hard to find the evidence. There are hundreds of websites that will give you the information, some of which I shared in the film. The EPA, the Environmental Defense Fund, National Wildlife Federation, people-powered machines, smaller American lawns today, the list goes on and on and on. There is no shortage of information about how damaging lawns are. So I went to the town board, and I gave them my information. And they all thought it was quaint and sweet, but they still passed the law. So my ultimate goal is to have the law changed. And I'm not saying that the lawn should be criminal. I'm saying that those who don't want to have a lawn should be allowed not to have a lawn. It's the right thing to do. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a real pleasure to be here and on this distinguished panel. Again, my name is Beth, and I'm with the Sustainability Institute at Molloy College. And we have been working on pesticide issues for many, many years. We had started getting calls from people with concerns, back in the 90s. So we started working on it, and we said we wanted to be a group that not just said, well, pesticides are bad for all these reasons, but we wanted to put forth the positive alternatives, and drive people towards what they should be doing and show them what the alternatives are and where to find them. So in doing so, we came up with something called the 4 Steps to a Toxic-Free Organic Lawn program. Because we thought, well, Scott's is brilliant at marketing, so we might as well steal their name, why not? So I'll just briefly run through the 4 steps and give you a few, resources. But I think we talked about it a little bit, but one of the main things that we can do to have an organic lawn is to mow the grass, to start an organic lawn, is to mow the grass a little higher. Like instead of it making it look like a golf course, that actually increases the amount of weeds because the weed seeds are ubiquitous in the soil. They're just all over the place. So if the sun is able to hit them, they'll grow. So if you shade out the weed seeds with the longer grass blades, you'll have fewer weeds, and it makes the grass stronger and better able to outcompete weeds as well. It's also cheap. It's free. Because people always say, is organic expensive? And some of the products can be. We'll talk about that. But this is a free step in that direction. Watering less frequently, but more deeply. You always want to cover the roots. That helps the plants to grow deeper roots, which makes them healthier. And also, you never want to pull a weed and just leave a bare patch. Because if there are bare patches, again, the weeds will just grow there. You always want to put grass seed down in a bare patch. So that was step 1. It's basically the maintenance practices. Step 2 is improving the life in the soil. Because as we heard in the film, just a handful of soil has millions and millions of organisms in it, and that's what helps to circulate the nutrients in the soil to keep the grass plants healthy. So whatever we can do to increase the soil biology, it's a good thing. And when we use pesticides, unfortunately, we're killing all of that soil life. So it's actually counterproductive. So to improve the life of the soil, the best thing to do is use good quality compost. Some of the towns offer good quality compost. You can also buy it. There's a company called Long Island Compost. You always want it to be a good quality, rich, thick, never smelling bad. That means it's not really good quality. And that will increase the soil microbes. And also using organic fertilizer. And this gets to what Kevin was saying, that synthetic fertilizer contains a water-soluble nitrogen that will just run right off the next time there's a rain. It'll green your grass up really quickly, but most of it just goes to waste. So if you use natural organic fertilizers, which usually have a lower number, when you see the NPK on a bag, a synthetic fertilizer, it'll say like a 30 or 28 is the first number. It's very high level of nitrogen. But organic fertilizers that are more natural might say like 8 or 10. So you might say, well, why should I use something that has less nitrogen? I thought that's good for the soil. But this is more natural nitrogen that will be broken down by the microbes in the soil. So it just breaks down more slowly. And you don't want to overdo that either, of course, because that will have effects. But normal use according to the label. Within, there's a law in Suffolk County, you're not supposed to apply fertilizer between November 1st and March 31st. We want to follow the laws. It's there for a reason. If we do that, that will make a big difference in reducing the nitrogen runoff. Third step is giving your grass a balanced diet. And essentially the main point here is maintaining the pH. You always want the pH to be about neutral, which is 7. And you can get pH tests at the nursery. It just helps with the cycling of the nutrients in the soil. And step 4, and last but not least, is the pest control. Because if you do all 3 of these other steps, you'll probably have fewer problems with pests in the first place. And again, it's like, how do we define a pest? Or dandelions, you can eat them. So are they a pest? It's really up to our perspective. But there are always things that we can do, like there's a product called corn gluten that's actually made from a protein from corn that stops seeds from germinating. So if you put it down very early in the spring, it'll reduce your weeds. Garlic juice can be purchased as a labeled product. It's good at repelling mosquitoes and ticks. Milky spore is a natural predator to Japanese beetle grubs in the soil. There are neem-based insecticides rather. It's made from a tree in India that has natural insecticidal properties. So these things can be found at good nurseries. Some of the much better nurseries on Long Island will carry things like this if you should even need them at all. I highly recommend Martyrs, for example. They've really dedicated themselves here in Bridgehampton to going organic and being a leader in that respect. There's also a great website I can leave you with called Safer Brand. It's saferbrand.com. Like any sort of pest you can ever imagine for indoor or outside. Outside they have a natural alternative to help you with that. Also just one word about dandelions. They actually like to, this is a little tip, they like to grow in soil that is depleted in calcium. So if you use calcitic lime to maintain your pH and it adds a little calcium, you'll have fewer and fewer dandelions over time. So you can keep that in mind. So I'll just leave you with a couple of resources real quick. We used to put out this big organic lawn guide, and unfortunately we don't do that anymore, but what we did was we boiled it all down into this nifty little brochure, so I brought some of those there on the table. My organization also does, as mentioned, an organic turf trade show every year where we train landscapers to do organic lawn care. I know Suzanne's been there before. So if you have a landscaper that you really like, but you want him or her to learn how to do organics, tell them to come to the show. It'll be in February, and we get people from all around the region. It's actually really exciting because I've been doing it for so long. I remember when we had like 100 people, and this past year we had 300 people. So it's really, really growing in interest. There's 25 vendors of all these great products, so that's very exciting. And what we produce out of that trade show is the organic landscaper list. And these are people who can provide 100% organic landscaping services from all around Long Island. And the list is on the table there. So I'll leave you with that. And one other thing that you should know, something my group also worked on for many years was the neighbor notice law. It was that, and it's all across, I think most of the counties in New York State have adopted this, that if your neighbor is getting sprayed by a professional applicator, you have the right to be notified in writing at least 48 hours in advance. So if you see them spraying the trees and you didn't get notice, you should complain to the Suffolk County Health Department because they have the authority to enforce that. Because it's really complaint driven. So it's our right, so we might as well make use of it. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. All right, thank you.
This is the opportunity for any of you to ask questions. Ooh, a lot of questions. Okay.
Well, how do you handle ticks?
I love answering this question. There are no more ticks in tall grass than there are in short grass. There are birds who eat ticks. There are funguses in the soil that will kill the tick nematode if we don't spray fungicides. There are also wasps who parasitize the tick nematode. However, when we sprayed DDT to kill mosquitoes, we killed most of those wasps. And that's why we have a tick explosion. We would have been better off enlisting the help of bats or swallows or martins to eat the mosquitoes. Nature has its own system of checks and balances, and very often when things are out of balance, it has to do with human beings. Other than that, there are some things that Beth mentioned, organic remedies that we can use.
Oh, I had just mentioned garlic spray.
And what about jiggers? I know that, you know, you check ticks, but then you also have the jiggers, which are really getting very, very bad. And it's a rash, it's a rash. It's a little red spider, yes, yeah.
Does the garlic oil control chiggers?
Garlic oil might control chiggers. I'm not sure. I'll have to read the label. They probably sell it at Martyrs. We'll have to go over there and look.
And certain birds eat chiggers also, especially chickens and guinea fowl.
Well, I don't have to have chickens on there.
Right.
Great. You're not allowed farming or.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for your expertise. I have a question. We have a new no-mow zone in our on our property because we are on the border and imposed by Southampton Town, and we are watching the poison ivy grow very close to the house, and I'm really concerned. I have grandchildren. I have a pet. You know, being infected by this. And is there any way of controlling this organically or otherwise, and without mowing or doing anything?
Poison ivy.
Well, I do know that there is a landscaper on our list called organicpoisonivyremoval.com. So if you go to organicpoisonivyremoval.com, they should be able to help. And I think literally what they do is just come and take it out, by hand. You have to really get it. I know like lemon and vinegar used to work if you get it when it's very young and the leaves are still small and soft, but once it's established, you really have to yank it. I don't think there's any other alternative.
Thriving.
I just also like to add about poison ivy. It is a native plant and it's a very important food source for several species. So if you do have a place where you can leave it, just consider it. Of course, I wouldn't leave it where you had children or pets, but if there was some place you could leave it, just give it a try.
I just wanted to speak on the buffers that you're speaking of, and I noticed in the film, I don't know if anyone else picked this up, did you notice how they were really mowed down into the actual marsh grasses? And in fact, there was one particular property, you could clearly see that they were probably taking a weed whacker to the Spartina. The separation from surface waters to certainly our living space is so incredibly important. What we do day in and day out, is probably deficient. It's not enough, I guess, with respecting these buffers. But again, we need that separation. So if in fact we are employing fertilizers and other products, you have, again, a sizable buffer, a separation from those waters, not only for habitat value, but again, as there is in fact going to be drainage, sheet flow and runoff coming off your property, by virtue of that band of natural vegetation will provide a cleansing effect.
Yes.
I tried to fight the golf course. I have everything organic on my property, no spray for years. Even when they did the aerial spraying, we did not have our property sprayed. So when the gypsy moth came, the natural predator took care of it. My property was fine while everyone who sprayed had a problem with the gypsy moth. Now, we have to learn that there are cycles also in our area where if the gypsy moth eats the canopy of trees, then the mountain laurel are healthier, and they take turns, and we are not learning that. And why did Southampton allow a golf course to come in with all its pesticides, and they're polluting our groundwater, and now we have chlorine city water coming in, which goes back into the groundwater also with all its chlorine. And I'm very upset because we had a utopia and no one is looking to the future. Even you are suggesting nematodes. Do you know what could happen with a nematode in the future? And also, when they dissolve the oil spill in Connecticut, they put chemicals down, carbon-eating bacteria that ate the oil. Years ago, they put it down. Now we're getting a flesh-eating disease coming from the salt water. So where is the person that says, I looked into the future, this is what happens? Where are the scientists that say, this is what happens, don't do it? And where are the reporters that report this?
Do you have a question for?
The question is, Kevin, what is happening with the water and the microbes that are putting in there for the oil and all the other things? What is happening to our salt water?
I can't speak to the microbes because I'm not certain what you're referring to, but I will say, you know, we do monitor water quality, and I think there's an alarming trend that our waters are in fact becoming enriched with nutrients and other pollutants. Stormwater is a major problem, and we really have to be very vigilant about reversing these negative trends that we're seeing, and that means becoming active yourselves, again, being on your best behavior, if you will, in your own, you know, within your own properties, and supporting efforts, groups like mine, my colleagues here, and certainly are participating in the public process to register to our elected officials and decision makers that, you know, this is what is a priority for us, and hopefully we'll move them in the right direction.
There's a question over there. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to comment further. Is that okay, Dawn? About disrupting natural ecosystems. There's a great book called Noah's Garden, Restoring the Ecology of Our Own Backyards. And in it she says something, and of course I'm paraphrasing, but every life form on Earth has a minute portion of the intelligence that makes the whole biosphere work. And everything is connected, so when you remove one organism, you remove not only that organism, but all of its connections. And she says that we've manipulated our land to the point where it is becoming too retarded to take care of itself, much less take care of us. The UN funded a source of report called the UN Millennium Ecosystem Report, and they determined that 60% of the life-supporting functions on Earth are in decline. That's scary, and human beings have a lot to do with that. When I give my lecture, I talk about weeds, and you know, the definition of a weed is a plant that's growing where you don't want it. So when you have a lawn, everything else is a weed, except for the lawn, and that includes native plants. I used 3 books to illustrate that. I have one book called Identifying and Harvesting Medicinal Plants by Stephen Brill, edible and medicinal plants. And then I have another one called Weeds, Observations on Some Misunderstood Plants. And both of these books will tell you what part of the plant you can eat, what time of year, how you can use it to heal yourself, what animals eat it, what butterflies eat it, how it's very important to soil erosion. And then I have a 3rd book by the Cyanamide Company, the same exact plants. The same exact plants, but they're going to tell you which chemical to kill with. Now you have these plants that are very important, and we're killing them with chemicals. Also, I learned recently that moles, as they tunnel through the ground, take beneficial funguses from one tree to another. So even moles, imagine. Not only do they break up compact soil, but every organism on Earth has a purpose, and we are disrupting it. We think we know everything, but we know nothing compared to the accumulated wisdom of every life form on Earth that makes our Earth work.
There was the question over there.
I'd actually like to comment on the question that's asked here.
I'm Dorothy Riley, and I'm on the Green Sustainability Committee of Southampton. And we've been working on this exact issue, and we are also very upset about the golf clubs and the pesticides that are being put on golf clubs. And what we're recommending now is that we only use green products. And right now, there'll be a meeting tomorrow at 3:30. This is addressed. And what we're trying to use is, we're trying to address that and be as strong as we possibly can. So the most effective thing that you all can do if you live in the town of Southampton is tomorrow when you wake up, email, I think all of the 5 council people, and also I think it would be helpful if you copied Bernadette. Bernadette is our new Green Town Coordinator for the town of Southampton, and we've been working for years to get her here. So a big welcome to her. But if you could also copy her on that, and that can give her the clout that she needs to go in and say, please give us the strongest policy that you possibly can on this.
What should it say, Dorothy? I mean,
well,
what is
you should.
What do you want us to say?
You should say that you are really concerned with our groundwater and you are really concerned with our environment, and you think it's imperative now that we have absolutely only organics on all town-owned properties and on town-owned golf courses. You want to say something? Okay, great.
Why just town-owned? Why not all the golf courses?
Okay, great. Yes, absolutely. Say it.
Better.
You can still request the strongest that you can. Whatever's in your heart, say it. And then after you give your email address, I would love it if you would address the question. Some of us have spouses that are working in transition and they really, really do love their lawns. And how do we go help them move away from, I mean, what are the steps? Do we just go immediately to you know, or there are stages of that? Anyway.
Hi, I'm Bernadette Glenn, your new Energy and Sustainability Coordinator. It's a pleasure. I first of all want to thank the filmmaker.
Yes.
What an incredible cast. Can we give her a round of applause? And, you know, I'm one of these guys. I have to tell you that in my previous incarnation, I know I've met Beth. Pleasure to meet you. And I know I've met Kevin. Before I came to this position, I'm an accredited organic land care professional. I've been accredited through the Northeast Organic Farmers Association for, I believe, 5 years. So, you know, I totally understand what these folks are talking about. I also will tell you that as a consultant, I am an organic turf consultant. It's rather odd for me to somewhat play devil's advocate for a lawn, but I actually help people have sustainable lawns every day. That was my job for a very long time. Much like our friend here, Suzanne, who had that incredible grandfather who inspired her. I was actually widowed 13 years ago and left a lawn care business. And I greened it. And I became a green entrepreneur in Massachusetts. And pretty much it was my living to make it look good, make it safe, make it not pollute the water, make it not kill your dog, and really not, you know, I called up the post office. I heard you talking about the post office just recently because I was sort of like, that's not an organic lawn. The reality is, since Thomas Jefferson visited England years ago and came back, after viewing those pasture lands, that's when America got hooked on lawns. We've been on this course for a really long time, and it's not something we're going to turn around overnight. This beautiful facility that we're all sitting in, I watched them install that lawn out front. And I went to them and I said to them, let me help you, please. And they said, oh no, we've got a really wonderful company, and we've got a great architect with some great ideas. And I, you know, could smell it, off-gassing, toxic VOCs, not very long after that installation. I witnessed the massive amounts of water that these folks are talking about that were used in a rather petrochemically embedded process that is the American lawn. So I educate people every day that there is an easy way. I really will tell you, I believe that we can all have an ecological landscape that's in balance. We can have some lawn. We can have those incredibly valuable buffers that Kevin's talking about. I show people how to buffer their own lawn so that they don't even have to water. And like Beth was talking about, you know, there's a huge difference between calcium lime versus magnesium lime. Basically, turf needs 7 times more calcium than magnesium. We're all living in the ecological fallout of acid rain, where there's a lot of mercury coming down from the sky, and it's causing a soil imbalance every day. So I will tell you that, you know, I clearly agree with all these folks, but I also came from, you know, a profession in which, like every landscaper out there, you know, I had to find a way to make my living helping people have beautiful landscapes. I don't think beauty's the problem. I think what we really want to do is start bringing it back in balance, start thinking in a more holistic way, really start thinking about how we're using our resources, how that's affecting our waters. There are some lawns that literally, I will tell you, not every lawn
is going to have that kind of runoff. If you have a really well aerated soil, the rain's going to fall and it's actually going to hold it. It can actually hold carbon. That's kind of my new cool thing. There's research out there by the Rodale Institute where lawns are actually capturing carbon. So, I mean, I'm going to speak here on July 1st at 7 o'clock. You guys can all come out and see me, as well as see me in The Truth About Cats, Dogs, and Lawns, which is the film that I'm in. My email is bgiblin, Giblin, at southamptontown.ny.gov. Tomorrow's my 2-week anniversary on the job.
Yes. You have a question back there?
I just have a basic question. For what would you suggest for sports fields or families that have a lot of children, they want to be playing football, soccer, they can't play in the high grasses, they can't play with dirt because they'll get caught in their cleats and their shoes, whatever. What would you suggest for those kinds of lawns where you need some kind of a lawn? And big lawns.
Well, there are actually schools on Long Island that have gone organic with their athletic fields. So in that case where you do need, a field where you can run around and kick a ball and it can't be tall grass, that obviously, like I said, there are ways that you can do it organically. Locust Valley was one of the first schools. They've been organic for like 10 years and they have beautiful turf. The problem on athletic fields is there's a lot of compaction because you have people running and stamping it down, so they have to aerate it a lot more, but it is possible.
Well, then are you suggesting turf or lawn?
No, not the fake turf. No, oh God, that's a whole other issue. We're generally against the artificial turf. I mean, it's evolving. I've seen ones that are supposedly better and don't have all the negatives associated with them. But I'm sure many of you have already heard that there's this stuff that it's crumbled rubber and it has heavy metals in it and all this kind of stuff. So I would just avoid it if possible. I think, like she was saying, soil sequestering carbon is always better.
Charles, you have a question.
I'd like to comment on the children and lawns issue. When I'm advocating for reducing lawn space, I get that question all the time. What about children? Children need lawns. Lawns are nice for athletic activities, of course, but children don't need lawns. In fact, I have a quote-unquote lawn, which is about the size of this group of chairs here in my yard, and I have a little over an acre. And I don't have human children of my own, although I have a lot of animals, but every one of my friends who has children is at my house all the time with their children. Because there they explore, they get lost, they climb trees, they chase butterflies, they look at worms, they turn up logs. I've heard recently that when you give a child a toy, his play with that toy is limited by the mind of the person who created that toy. But when they're in nature, nature is limitless. And I have seen children come to life, like they come to life nowhere else when they're exploring in nature. There's a lot of research done now that, read Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder. Lack of nature is lack to obesity, low test scores, conflicts, low self-esteem. When children have time in nature, their grades improve across the board. They have less conflict, more respect for themselves and others. Nature is very good for children and adults. It improves our blood pressure. When we're sick, we recover faster if we have time in nature. We need less medication. Our blood pressure goes down. We have better focus. Nature is good for us, and the lawn is not a natural enterprise. So I wanted to answer something that Dara asked. How do we take back portions of our lawn when it's something that we really love? The lawn started in Europe, as was mentioned. The wealthiest people who had the most livestock had their vegetation eaten low. So that was the look of wealth, low vegetation. And less wealthy people trying to emulate wealth started to cut down their lawns. And that's how the lawn started as a status symbol, and that's why it's still a status symbol today. But the new status in America and around the world is going green. Taking care of our home, our planet, having respect for it. So with that in mind, when I meet clients, we establish no-mow zones. We just rope out sections and tell the lawnmowers not to go there anymore. At my own house, I actually use a sickle. It's great fun, it's great exercise, gets my back all aligned. People also use electric mowers or push mowers. Actually, the New York Times said that revegetating lawn space with native plants is the avant-garde in landscaping. So that's something to consider if you want to be cool. Did I answer your question? Okay.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Charles?
You know, I don't have a question, but I'm a really lucky individual. I have 4 acres on the beach. I don't own a garden hose. I don't own a hose. I've never fertilized in my life. So I don't really understand what the thing is about fertilizer and
it's a drug.
I mean, my lawn looks great. I mean, I do cut my lawn, but you know, gee.
There used to be a guy that came to our organic turf trade show, and he would sell T-shirts that said, "Get your lawn off drugs."
It's been in my family for a long time, but no one's ever fertilized it. So.
I have a question. I'm a realtor, and I've several times had people call and ask me for pest control companies because they wanted their toddler to play in the grass, and there were worms and ants in the grass. And I tried to explain that the chemicals that you put down to kill the ants and worms would be absorbed by the toddler. They didn't understand that at all, and that there's a connection. There's a lot of information about the connection to diseases, human diseases from these pesticides. But people coming from the city, they don't understand that. They want a pristine, clean lawn.
I'm going to correct you on that. I think it's not folks coming from the city, because in my opinion and my observations over the years, they came out here for the country. It's the new movement, if you will, is suburbia coming out here to the country and saying, you know, the Home Depot's not down the road. We need a Home Depot, and we need the trophy lawn.
So how do I?
Give them one of our organic landscaper lists.
I wanted to put a flyer, and my company wouldn't let me put information in with my. I sometimes need rental packages when people stop. And they said, no, they don't want to alarm people. They want everybody to see it's beautiful. You know, everything is beautiful and there are no problems. So don't mention things like that.
I also wanted to mention that, believe me, I'm not trying to get work. I have more work than I can handle. But this is a brochure about my company, and it just outlines some of the facts about lawns and what a joy it is not to have one, and how much easier it makes your life not to rake the leaves and mow and all that stuff that we're addicted to. But I wanted to, part of the reason we are doing this and the reason why we're so passionate about it is because of things that you're talking about. This information is readily available, and we want to bring it forward, because when I stand up in front of people and I give the facts, I see light bulbs go off in people's head. The place where I talk the most is at the Nature Lyceum School for Organics, and most of the time I'm sitting in a room full of people who mow lawns for a living, and if they can get it, anybody can get it. The facts speak for themselves. So I encourage everyone to take one of these pamphlets.
All right, one more question, Julia.
Well, actually, it wasn't a question for people that live in East Hampton. They mentioned compost. You get free compost at the dump. And not only that, you are paying gardeners that go there. They use that on all the gardens and people's lawns and everything. And you get it for nothing. And if you wanted to get a truckload of something, you could always hire somebody and have them come and spread it. Because a friend of mine was using mulch. And the guy came and he says, don't use that. He says, I'll go and get you all that you want. And he came and he put all this stuff down. And that's all natural. It comes from trees and limbs, and it's no food in it. They used to use food. Now it's just the limbs and everything. And that's free. I used to go and get it myself in Pale.
That's great.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'd like to thank our